Welcome, and thank you. I should add Shifra Dersanya. Thank you very much to all the organizers and to the inviters and to Yeshiva University for having the vision and the Hachnasat Orchim to host us all today. So I'm Laura, and I am a Litvak. Or a descendant, anyway, of one. I come to you from Toronto, where the organizer of the popular Agnon group was born in Buchach. So that's our claim to fame. We're not so organized, but we're dedicated. And finally, I should just add, since we're all telling how we met up with Agnon, I met up with Agnon's work in high school when there was such a thing called Bechina Yerushalmit. Is there still? Awesome. Yes. If you prepared for Bechina Yerushalmit, you more or less paralleled the units of Bagrut that you would do for Sifrut. Agnon was a mainstay, of course, and the carrot in front of all of us donkeys was that if you spent your junior year abroad, if you passed Bechina Yerushalmit with a certain percentage, you had an automatic ptor. You didn't have to go to Ulpan. So we got there in the middle of August, and then they told us, might as well take Ulpan anyway, that's where you're going to meet people. So we all went into level Vav and learned some more Hebrew. And you know what? We really needed it, so.
What high school was that?
Community Hebrew Academy of Toronto, Chat. It's now Tannenbaum Chat. Yeah. So that was my intro to Agnon. I didn't know we weren't supposed to understand it. Shai Agnon's Klipat Tapuach Zahav, Orange Peel, first appeared in Haaretz on Asara B'Tevet Tafshin, which corresponds to December 22nd, 1939. The story is subtitled in parentheses, Feuilleton of an incident, or an incident that never occurred. The French feuilleton refers to a printed page or leaf of a newspaper, similar to Gilayon in Hebrew, and was commonly used for light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek compositions or sometimes serials. Despite the self-effacing title, which is suggestive of an entertaining fluff piece, we know that sometimes the most serious criticism and harshest truths are expressed in jest. Through the narrator, Orange Peel levels some of the author's criticisms of emergent Israel's bureaucracy and its society's herd instinct enacted at the expense of individual autonomy and at times that of collective welfare. In the metaphysics of Agnon's political satire, Jeffrey Sachs conveys a literary machloket about the capacity of the social satires of Sefer HaMedina, Klipat Tapuach Zahav among them, to carry Agnon's characteristically multivalent writing. On the one hand, Gershon Shaked had expressed his doubts about whether such allegorical pieces could give rise to an array of understandings. That is, could there be more than one nimshal or multi-dimensional nimshalim for these mishalim? On the other hand, Ariel Hirschfield asks, do we truly understand what our orange peel littering the streets, At the
top there's an arrow for them.
Okay. Do we truly understand what our orange peel littering the public domain truly represents? Might it not be a symbol pointing in multiple directions? And isn't this a clever enough story to keep multiple ideas in play? It is in response to Hirschfeld's question that I situate my analysis of Klipat Tapuach Zahav, specifically the strong reading I propose as one of the plausible understandings of the parable. Despite the fact that textually speaking, there is decidedly less to mine in Klipat Tapuach Zahav than in some of its companion pieces, the proposed reading, in combination with the common threads running through Sefer HaMedina, so this proposed strong reading presents one possible nimshal for an enriched reading among potentially multiple nimshalim. Israel has long been the site of of a productive tension between individual and collective needs, desires, and actualities. From the plural and public anu banu accounts of the aliyot and the communal ethos of the early formative statehood stories, state-building stories, to the introspective ani of late 20th century Israeli novels and lyrical poetry, we see varying degrees of torque between personal interest and group concerns. Agnon, an acute observer of human nature, makes an art of this very tension in his idiosyncratic constellation of 4 stories written between 1939 and 1950 that he grouped together with an introduction as Sefer HaMedina. Set in the pre-statehood Yishuv, the Book of State or State Book Satires pit public inertia against individual initiative and vested personal interests against the collective good. First, this paper takes a brief look at the satires with a wide-angle lens for threads that unite them. Then, it homes in on Klipat Tapuach Zahav and interprets it as a parable that makes use of literary mediation in the transmission of cultural values, to quote Angela Locatelli, who's a cultural theorist. In this case, the cultural values of the emergent Medina in Eretz Yisrael. In the process, the analysis draws on Rambam's approach to the expression of wisdom in language in order to present a strong allegorical reading of the text. Klipat Tapuach Zahav, the third of the 4 satires, shares the most prominent threads that run through the 4-story compilation. First, the projection of too much talk and too little decisive action, specifically a preponderance of public pontification and a paucity of individual initiative, and second, a marked lack of respect for it and attempts to restrict it when it does occur. The tension between word and deed, or lack thereof, becomes apparent as early as the introduction, in which Baal Sefer HaMedina sets out to chronicle the occurrences, accomplishments, and exploits of the Medina. For various reasons, not least of which is his own indolence, the task eludes him. Again, I'll refer you to the metaphysics of Agnon's political satires by Sachs regarding the slippery nature of the concept of Medina, as it seems to morph back and forth between a physical and metaphysical entity. The narrator ends up sketching only a handful of vignettes about the escapades of the leaders, statesmen, businessmen, doyens of Va'ad Halashon, and other self-important impresarios. Of course, only for Agnon speaks volumes. In the first story, HaChotfim, the abductors or kidnappers, published in 1942, there's a scarcity of deed and a profusion of speech-making by politicians, such as the character Schreiholz, Yiddish for screaming tree or screaming chunk of wood, an uncomplimentary reference to a budding statesman. If I knew how to do that cough where you say the name under your breath, I would. Agnon installs his criticism in the parable from its inception. I refer you to the yellow highlighted portions. Of an excerpt from HaChotfim on the screen. The sheer number of words Agnon embeds in the text related to speech, discussion, expounding, declaiming, and oration, such as lin'om, lidrosh, and ladun, far outweighs the number connected to deed or supposed accomplishment. In fact, the latter, shown in green, mainly from the root ayin sin yud, for la'asot, to do. The latter, what do you know? Yes, reversed. In reverse. They're couched in the negative and accrue throughout Sefer HaMedina as a prominent leitmotif, not doing, or things as though they were done. In HaChotfim, a spate of clandestine abductions by opposing political interest groups takes place to keep the leaders of the respective opposition from dominating the auditoria and influencing the public with their words. This underhanded phenomena ultimately leads to diminished attendance in public venues, fewer political speeches, the enhancement of the quality of family life with family members actually at home and communicating, and an increase in the learning of classical texts on the part of individuals. The second story, Shlom Olamim, also published in 1942, encodes a drought through an intertextual conversation with Vehaya im Shamoa, and depicts a consequent food shortage leading to starvation, illness, and death among the masses, while entrepreneurial food storage magnates managed to produce groaning boards just sagging under the weight of all their hoarded victuals. These keep their bellies full and their profits rising. Two opposing factions, those who cover their heads and those who do not, and splinter groups of each, pull together by default, and they work against a maverick who takes it upon himself to actually do something, in this case pray for rain, without first seeking the sanction of either group. The guilds of the opposing factions eventually work together against their own best interests to weave a shatiach, a covering or a canopy, to keep any rain that might result from said rogues' petitions from reaching the earth. In the planning phases of this misguided enterprise, the amount of talking, or our colleague might say windbaggery, reaches new heights when all the bigwigs troop off for a summit at a place dubbed Siftotayim. Picture multiple pairs of jabbering lips, or in the jargon of our age, we would say talking heads. I won't spoil the ending. The fourth satire, since I fear we won't get to it later, published in 1950, is Al-Hamisim, a title that riffs on Al-Hanisim through assonance. In it, the bureaucrats muster all the wisdom we would usually ascribe to the wise men of Chelm, and to decide to tax walking sticks in order to make up the Medinales mounting deficit. The third satire opens on an orange peel that has been cast into a public thoroughfare. Observers react variously to its presence. Some are hotheads, just jealous of its languor, lying about, attracting attention, and causing harm without remorse. Some are moderates who pin the blame on whichever ravenous glutton gobbled the fruit and then tossed the rind aside. Some denigrate the municipality for being lax in its street cleaning duties. After all, the Iriya collects taxes for this very purpose. Besides onlookers' reason, at least the consumer of the orange has made an effort, a point of eating locally grown fruit and not the imports. They wish more people would follow suit, and wouldn't that teach the municipality a lesson? One pedantic soul ponders the spelling of klipa and is adamant that the spelling of it plene with a yud would be an egregious error that ought to be addressed post-haste. Some stare at it, some slip on it, still others debate responsibility for its removal. Another individual interprets the discarded peel as a symbol of autonomy, showing that people feel free to do the same in public as they do at home. One woman, the wife of a state clerk, some jobnik, starts broadcasting to anyone who will listen the story of her mother-in-law who broke her leg by slipping on a fruit peel, and all the woes that ensued for herself, that is. This woman and her outspokenness is Agnon's equivalent of a YouTube clip that makes the matter of the orange skin go viral. The perfectly lovely peel goes on lying in the street. People see it, people talk about it, nobody lifts a finger to remove it. The peel is buffeted by breezes, scorched by the sun, bypassed by the masses. It remains in the public eye day by day, losing its luster. At the height of the drama, the storyteller interpolates himself into the plot by daring to shatter both narratorial propriety and public stasis. He boldly steps into the narrative and into the street and prepares to remove the deteriorating peel, lest quarrels escalate and imperil the community. His unusual undertaking evokes strong feelings among the bystanders. One woman takes pity on all the other poor peels and papers in the street and implores the narrator to pick them up. Along comes a man who adjures her to calm down. He relates rumors of a partition plan and suggests that the peel could very well fall outside of our jurisdiction, so why bother? Baal Sefer HaMedina decides nevertheless to do a little extra tidying up of the public space. Along comes a series of people to dispense their free and oh-so-sage advice: how to push the peels aside, how to remove them, where to throw them. First pick up the grapefruit peels. No, first the banana peels. No, first some other kind of peel. In order to fulfill, or perhaps avoid, all this very sage advice, the narrator starts scooping up everything in sight using both hands. כדי לצאת כל הדעות, התחיל בעל ספר המדינה עושה בשתי ידיים בבת אחת. אלא שבעלי עצות מרובים, וידיו של אדם מועטות. Ultimately, the heated arguments erupt among the dispensers of all this good advice, threatening danger, the very outcome the storyteller had sought to prevent. His audacious move precipitates a chain of events that concludes with a police officer issuing tickets to the storyteller for illegally assembling crowds in public places, being makhil kehalot, not to mention causing a public ambuha, and, of course, for practicing a trade without a license. In Klipat Tapuach Zahav, the narrator performs his message literally. When it comes to public hygiene, safety, and waste management, individuals like himself need to step in. But Agnon's writing is far more complex than the performance of a singular mimetic message, of course. In fact, any modern literature, any attempt, writes Locatelli, to extract a univocal moral of the fable, a single-minded intention, would be an unacceptable hermeneutic constraint. And I say of Agnon's writing, alachat kama v'chama. Figuratively, the storyteller is performing another message altogether. The question is where to look for textual cues and in order to decode it. As mentioned, this story is not as densely encoded with rhetorical devices or allusions or intertextual conversations as most of Agnon's stories. At bare minimum, we can look to the titles, at which Agnon excels at intimating associations. Shmuel Schneider's not here, but he mentioned Ha'adonit this morning. That was going to be one of my examples, or Bayar Uva'ir for its clever metathesis. So Klipat Tapuach Zahav does present us with a clue in the form of its allusion in its title to the golden apples of Ketuvim, as opposed to the modern Hebrew epithet for oranges, later to coalesce as Tapuzim. In Mishlei 25:11 we read, Tapuchei Zahav b'maskiot kasef, davar davur al ofnav. Golden apples in silver filigree holders are phrases well turned. The golden apples of Proverbs, displayed in silver coverings with apertures through which the golden fruit remains visible, are likened metaphorically, admittedly with a little help from Parshanut, to fine wordings such as those we find in belletristic writings. In the introduction to his 12th century work, Moreh Nevuchim, The Guide of the Perplexed, Maimonides makes amplified use of the biblical metaphor of the golden apples in silver showpieces in relation to the expression of wisdom, particularly the oracles of the biblical prophets. Excuse me. Where am I going to go for my other... one other PDF. I'll come back to that.
Two things?
Maimonides. Thank you. Thank you. Maimonides writes, "See how beautifully the conditions of a good metaphor are described in this good figure. It shows that in every word that has a double sense, a literal one and a figurative one, the plain meaning must be as valuable as silver, and the hidden meaning still more precious. so that the figurative meaning bears the same relation to the literal one as gold to silver. The same is the case with the figures employed by the prophets. Taken literally, such expressions contain wisdom useful for many purposes, among others for the amelioration of the condition of society. Their hidden meaning, however, is profound wisdom, conducive to the recognition of real truth. With Rambam's analogy in mind, I return first to the state book Satires in general, and then to the specific story of the orange peel to discern the allegorical messages. In examining their allusions and rhetorical devices, I find that what really piques the narrator's interest and actually arouses his ire and keeps him on a roll is anything and everything related to language in the emergent Medina. The way Hebrew is perpetuated, innovated, spelled, pronounced, taught, written, published, and handled. Through the observations of Baal Sefer HaMedina, Agnon expresses that he despises the overuse and abuse of language in pompous speech-making. Think of Schreiholz. He despises the high-level meetings with low-level thinking, Sifto Chaim, and the no-nonsense and the nonsense he presents as snatches of conversations overheard in the street in Klipat Tapuach Zahav. He abhors the pandering to pundits in terms of spellings and misspellings. We can consider protestia in Shlomo Lamim, one with one tet and one tav to cater to those who are partial to one or the other, among the almighty Lishon Ya, maybe we say Lishon Ka at Yeshiva U. It's the... No, we don't. Vad halashon. No, that was a joke, like, ginger ale, ginger kale. Okay. That's the forerunner of Ha'akademia Lilashon Ha'ivrit. Consider the debates over whether to spell words maleh or chaser in strict accordance with Torah Nikud. In Shlomo Lamim, too, he jeers at the diminishing prowess of writers in composing rhyme. Why else, he wonders, would Va'ad Halashon generate so many words by tacking the syllables ya and yot, or ya and iyot, onto loan words, rather than reviving and reinvesting words drawn from classical Hebrew texts with new and nuanced meanings. Many readers are willing to hear the voice of the narrator and his pronounced language predilections in the state book Satires and in other stories as the voice of Agnon in propria persona. Consider, for example, the storyteller of Chush HaReach, outside Sefer HaMedina. He spends countless sleepless nights scouring Sifrut Chazal and all sources for one that justifies a turn of phrase that he has used through his own keen language knowledge, but has caused some raised eyebrows about his linguistic competence among less erudite writers. Only an artist and language perfectionist like Agnon would have done so. In such instances, the narrator's voice and the author's voice overlap, in my opinion. We are well aware that Agnon the civilian took issue with language-related matters in the public arena. He was a proponent of the Hebrew language as the language of instruction for students, especially those preparing to teach. He looked askance at those who purported to have extensive linguistic knowledge in their languages of origin, but resisted the use of Hebrew in their pedagogy for Hebrew language and literatures. In Shlomo Lamim, he deploys acerbic wit to disparage the committee of language experts assembled to confer a name on the shatiach that the guilds have woven. They ultimately entrusted the naming to the society called Lishon Ya. The self-same Lishon Ya, appointed in charge of the language, whose members are all language experts and wordsmiths, and among them are even members expert in the language of the Medina. There came a point at which Agnon felt compelled to part company with Ha'akademia Lelashon Ha'ivrit over language-related tensions and politics. In truth, Agnon was every bit as responsible for the revival of Hebrew as a communicative language as those who are often more publicly credited. With the biblical allusion to tapuchei zahav b'maskiot kasef in mind, as well as Rambam's extension of the metaphor, we have the opportunity to reread Klipat Tapuach Zahav with fresh eyes. In retrospect, the title is indeed the first clue that in this story too, Agnon is exercised about the Hebrew language and the way it's handled. If the lackluster item lying in the street is Klipat Tapuach Zahav, metaphorically speaking, and a fine phrase or wording, allegorically speaking, then the golden apple that it must have displayed is long gone. The silver casing is being tarnished and bent out of shape as people trample it. The phrase or word is being defaced and devalued. Based on the metaphor's outline, my strong reading proposes that in this story, Agnon levels his criticism of word pollution in the Medina. With so much speech-making and rhetoric in the state book Satires, people have absorbed the essence of the golden apples, or not, have carried the silver slogans and phrases of the politicians and other leaders out of the meeting halls and into the streets. I wonder what he would think of people tweeting them and posting them on websites and blogs these days. The citizens of the Medina have used and abused those words, then discarded them like so much detritus. The narrator, so aware of and responsive to language, cannot stand the situation any longer. He sets out to address the word pollution by rescuing the words. In this regard, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that words can and do become devalued over time. In his essay, Revealment and Concealment in Language, Bialik expressed this thought in contemplating the power of words in their nascence, and noting that over time and through use, words are susceptible to a loss of impact. They become empty husks or abandoned peels, as in our story. The good news, according to Bialik, is that the husks are durable. In 2016, we'd say sustainable, right? To mix metaphors, the husks can be retrieved and refilled with new and precious golden apples. With a little polish, they'll shine like maskiot kesef to draw the eye to the gleaming fruit within. In the proposed strong reading of Agnon's Klipat Tapuach Zahav, I suggest that refilling the klipa would have been the storyteller's next step. Like Agnon, who frequently breathed new life into ancient words, so perhaps would he. To be sure, this strong reading is only one plausible understanding of the story among several potential responses to Hirschfeld's musings about the capacity of Klipat Tapuach Zahav for complex symbolism. So in that context, I'll close with the words of Locatelli. Good literature always is political and philosophical in a broad sense, rather than doctrinaire in a narrow sense. This is what makes it intrinsically ethical, that is, perpetually imbricated with the question of being variously and perfectibly human. The word on the street is that Agnon's writing is very much this good kind of literature.